year, the Military Times actually looked into what war with Iran would look like. Todd South is a ground combat reporter at the Military Times. He's also one of the reporters on that story. He joins me now from Vienna, Virginia. Thank you so much for joining us. So the Military Times interviewed more than a dozen military experts, both current and former U.S. military experts, to sort of piece together how a conflict might begin and how it would play out. What did you find? What are Iran's capabilities that the U.S. is most fearful of?
Well, while they do have a lot of conventional military capabilities, such as missiles and different types of naval or maritime assets, much of it doesn't necessarily match up very well with the high-tech and pretty extreme options that are presented by the U.S. So a lot of it will obviously fall to a lot of the proxy attacks. Much of what they've done over the course of decades of fighting in Iraq, more recently in Syria, and even the more recent attacks we've seen, such as on the embassy and other locations within Iraq. So while some of the conventional military equipment and units are at their disposal, their playbook has often leaned on the proxies throughout the region.
Is there a sense of what the easiest, closest target might be for them?
We have a lot of assets ringed all throughout the Persian Gulf. Of course, on the side of most of our allies or locations, ports, and of course Bahrain is a huge naval port. A lot of ships go there to refuel, restock, drop off equipment. We have airfields, of course, that we utilize in Kuwait, United Arab Emirates. We even down in Oman, we have locations where we have assets and supplies for any potential war within CENTCOM. So those are yes, they have security, but they're not necessarily as hardened targets as you might expect. So those always present a problem. Ships going out throughout the area. There have been threats of anti-ship missile strikes going a few years back off the coast of Yemen on U.S. ships that could have presented huge problems and caused major casualties. Anything that they can catch U.S. forces off guard or expose any kind of vulnerabilities are things that they would exploit.
You know, a lot of times, Todd, in this part of the world, they like to wait until people's guard is sort of lowered and you don't have a sense that this is coming. It's a very different environment now. So with that knowledge and understanding, what's really, when you war game this out, what is the extreme consequence, the extreme attack that they're most fearful of at this point?
I would say anything. So far, a lot of the discussions have been made public, at least, are that Iran would look at military targets, and that can range from a lot of things. They can see a U.S. embassy as a military target. They can see small encampments as military targets, as I said, ports and airfields. But even what we might not consider military targets, such as oil tankers that could be sunk or destroyed or damaged, that would clog up things in the Gulf, causing massive problems with oil distribution across the globe. Those little strategic touch points and choke points that present themselves huge security problems for American military, despite the fact that we have a tenfold or more differential in terms of our abilities militarily. Small positioning, small attacks could cause big problems.
And most believe that the primary concern remains Iran's ballistic missiles. Give us a sense, Todd, of what these missiles are that they have in their arsenal and what they're really capable of.
They have pretty extreme ranges, at least reported. I mean, a lot of this stuff's hard to prove. It's gone off intelligence reports or kind of some of the things they claim. So they do claim ranges clear out into the 2,500 or a little more kilometer range, which even hits as far as, say, Italy. Definitely covers most of the Middle East and into, of course, into North Africa. And of course, we saw with the Persian Gulf War with Saddam in Iraq, they launched a pretty fairly low-tech Scud missiles that caused problems with Israel. Our defense forces and our anti-missile defense forces are a little more sophisticated now, but so are the missiles. So it's a little bit of a cat and mouse game, and there's been claims that they've developed cruise missile technology that would allow them to kind of circumvent some of our defenses. However, when we spoke with a lot of experts on the missile defense side and on the offensive capabilities, one of the first things American forces would do with a lot of their aircraft in the area, long-range bombers, missile strike capabilities, and of course the maritime options with aircraft carriers would be to take out a lot of first Iran's missile sites and then, of course, its own missile defenses, leaving the country of Iran itself pretty vulnerable should we decide to attack within the borders of Iran.
We've heard Iranian leaders talk about U.S. allies as well in the region. What could an impact of war with Iran have on our allies there in the region?
Well, first and foremost, that Iran's always had a kind of back and forth, as you've just said it nicely, with Saudi Arabia. They've launched stuff there. They've fought a proxy war, Saudi Arabia and Yemen. So immediately Saudi Arabia would be under threat. Pretty much everything within range of Iran would be under threat, and that would cause huge problems with one of the biggest oil distributors within the world, of course. So anything within Saudi Arabia would be in threat, similar to the way it was when Iraq invaded Kuwait in the first Persian Gulf War.
You know, I know it's really hard to establish this or say this in any kind of war, but when you do look at this, what would any sort of U.S. victory look like in a war head-on with a power like Iran?
It is hard to say. You're right. I think that some people on some sides of the fence would hope for any kind of military conflict to result in a kind of an ideological or regime change within Iran. Most experts we talked to, I would say basically all experts we talked to, said that was highly unlikely, despite what some people have tended to forecast. Militarily, it would mean a lot of bombings, a lot of strikes, unfortunately, a lot of deaths, especially on the Iranian side within Iran. But it wouldn't necessarily destroy the regime. In fact, some of the missile sites are hardened; they're in caves. While some defenses could be taken out from the air, and a lot of things can be done from the sea, any control of any territory requires controlling the actual ground. And no planner we talked to, no general, admiral, no one of any stripe that we spoke to over the dozen-plus interviews we did with experts advocated for any kind of land invasion of Iran. The problems we had with the invasion of Iraq and post-toppling of Saddam's regime would pale in comparison to what we would face within the country of Iran by all experts' standards and metrics.
Todd South. Todd, it's a fascinating story, still holds today. I want to thank you very much for your reporting and for walking us through what this might look like.
Thank you.